In 1947, when India got its independence from the British rule, most experts, historians, politicians across the world had said that India will disintegrate and get completely destroyed in less than 10 years. India has too many ethnicities, religions, languages, cultures to coexist together. On top of that, it has a massive size, enormous population, and exceptional poverty and illiteracy who can never exist in one stable nation without dictatorship, army rule, or endless revolutions which would finally demolish it. Yet, 79 years later today, India continues to remain a stable nation. India still has many problems, but it is a miracle that such a huge country remained integrated, democratic, and thriving for so many decades and made a progress which has surprised the world in many ways. It is important to learn from those steps by any country as well as India's own future on what keeps a country stable, progressing, and democratic for a long time, because losing that success is also very easy. In this episode, I'll point out 11 factors that contributed to making India a stable nation and how India's 79 years stability has been extremely valuable to many countries and their people around the world. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jaya Talk Show. Number one, credible data. A milestone step in early days of India's independence, which is less talked about, made one of the greatest contributions to India's progress and stability. At the time the British left India in 1947, there was no centralized socio-economic data to plan anything. India was witnessing millions of deaths due to starvation, severe lack of food and agriculture, and a completely deindustrialized nation. One of the first visionary steps of India was developing the Indian Statistical Institute for National Planning through the appointment of Professor P.C. Mahalanobis by Prime Minister Nehru. According to an article in BBC, one of the most transformative changes in India was done through the introduction of Mahalanobis's National Sample Survey in 1950, which worked as a light switching on in India's policy making. ISI became the starting point of planning India's policies through collecting data that progressed India from utter poverty, illiteracy, mass starvation, and lack of industry. The National Sample Survey not only helped India's policymaking, it made a huge contribution worldwide in learning about collecting sample data and planning on it. The method was later used by the World Bank and United Nations. It was known as the biggest and the most comprehensive sampling inquiry ever undertaken in any country in the world. The Statistical Institute first created models for food security. It then created public health policy by collecting detailed demographic data for the first time. It planned India's rapid industrialization from 1950 through modeling resource allocation and statistical quality control. This rapid industrialization played a crucial role in India's sovereignty and self-determination as it made India independent of foreign imports. Here is the miracle that happened. For 100 years before 1947, that is from 1850 to 1947, India's growth rate was just 0.5%. 3 years after independence, in 1951-52 financial year, India's growth rate jumped to 2.3%, an immediate jump after 100 years of stagnation. Apart from the progress it did to India, a huge respect worldwide was created on the credibility of data that came out from India and gave a new learning to the rest of the world about authentic and robust data collection. Nobel Prize winning economist Angus Deaton and co-author Valerie Kozel wrote in 2005, where Mahalanobis and India led, the rest of the world has followed. So that today, most countries have a recent household income or expenditure survey. Most countries can only envy India in its statistical capacity. Why was India's credible data a big reason for India's continued democracy? This is because when government data is manipulated or lacks complete authenticity, decisions and policies made on them gravely affect millions of people. Manipulated data will produce more manipulated data and more bad policies in a vicious cycle, while showing a beautiful image of the country to the world and to its own citizens. It is impossible to carry on democracy for too long in such a country, and soon the country spirals into dictatorship and oppression to manage its own people. This is also the reason why credible data never comes out from autocratic countries, while those countries who strive to stay democratic first put huge efforts in building honest data, and that is what India had the vision to do from the very beginning. A lesser known fact is that this Indian Statistical Institute also gave birth to the first seed of India as an IT superpower. The first computer in Asia outside of Japan was developed by ISI before China and any other Asian countries. This was because ISI needed to perform large calculations on the statistical data for India's social planning. India could not afford to import an expensive computer at that time. So, in 1953, one of the Asia's first analogous computer got manufactured in India in the Indian Statistical Institute. Number two, continued free elections and maintenance of diversity. It is very easy for a government once in power to crush all oppositions by using the country's money and institutions, imprisoning all political opponents, and continuing to stay in power forever. Most countries all over Asia, Africa, South America, and even many parts of Europe started out as democracies but quickly descended into autocracies in this manner. When such dissension towards autocracy happens, foreign powers frequently put puppet regimes in those countries. Or over time, a major civil war breaks the country, or complete dominance through army happens on their own citizens. India, even with so much of diversity, poverty, huge size, and complications, never faced a foreign regime change or a breaking up into many parts, or an army coup or a dictatorship, because from 1951, a system of fair election was put in place that continued uninterruptedly through decades. Many experts have said that this continued free elections was one major reason why regime change by foreign hands was not possible in India, unlike most other developing countries. In British India, only 15% of Indians were allowed to vote based on their property, religion, literacy, gender, etc. After independence, India was a rare country to immediately give voting rights to every citizen, and then going to great lengths in including every last citizen in every remote corner of such a huge country into the voting list. After that, one of the most visionary steps was appointing an election commission as an independent body not controlled by the government to oversee the fairness of the elections. In 1977, after a brief period of emergency of 11 months in India, elections were held. In that election, the ruling party in the government lost. This is because even during an authoritarian government, the election in India stayed fair and the government did not steal the result. Also, unlike most other countries, India created an environment of encouraging opposition. India treated its opposition with respect and did not imprison them or bankrupt them or persecute them when they lost power, as most other countries do. Also, very uniquely, India's power transition from a loser to a winner in elections after elections always happened smoothly. Along with fair elections and encouragement of opposition, a crucial step India took was bringing about a visible respect for the diversity in its population. India is one of the most complicated countries in terms of its vastly diverse population. It would have been impossible to keep it together and govern unless a framework was created to uphold the pride and cultures of different sections of so many layers. A major step was dividing the country into states based on languages and ethnicities, which started from 1950. As a result, elections in states could bring leaders who could uphold the cultures of a region and oppose any force by the central powers to eradicate their indigenous practices, cultures, or languages. Because of this, even today, India does not have one national language. Also, while many established democracies have two or three political parties, India was unique in creating one of the largest numbers of political parties in its country. It is a total of 744 political parties as of today. Political parties in power are changed often, and smaller parties play vital roles in forming coalitions that decide who will be in power. Because of an independent election commission, an environment got created in India where new political parties could come up and strongly fight elections and continue to exist through decades without perishing even when out of power. This made it difficult to form one autocratic government in India. Number three, non-aligned movement. A big step in India's foreign policy in its early years also played a critical role in saving India from falling prey to a puppet government getting installed by foreign hands. From 1947 to 1991, during the Cold War era, both Soviet and American superpowers frequently attempted to change regimes of countries in different parts of the world and install their own puppet governments, dictators, or army rule. They did it using covert operations like militia, spreading misinformation, manufacturing protests, pressurizing with aid and trade, and many other nefarious methods. India's first Prime Minister Nehru understood that these activities are a great danger to not just India, but to a large number of newly independent countries that were formed around the world at that time. India planned a counter to this danger in 1961 through the non-aligned movement. The idea was to form a pillar through the joint effort of a coalition of countries that would stop dependence on either superpowers for their arms and economic trade and would not tolerate any interference by foreign forces on their country's internal matters. India became a founding father and a chief architect of this movement. At first, five countries, India, Indonesia, Yugoslavia, Egypt, and Ghana, formed it. Over time, 120 countries joined this non aligned movement, which became a powerful voting bloc in the United Nations General Assembly. Together, they made a visible resistance against regime change, sanctions, military actions on their territories by superpowers. Over the decades, stalwarts and scholars worldwide wrote about how non-aligned movement was a major reason why India did not fall prey to a regime change operation by foreign powers, and how India's leadership role in it helped in the liberation and freedom of many people around the world. Because India formed its foreign policies closely based on non alignment, it did not depend on any one of the superpowers for its economic and defense requirements. This was the primary reason, along with India's democratic institutions, that stopped foreign powers from pressurizing India's regime or army or its citizens. Over half the countries in the world joined with India to form this pillar to stop attack on India's sovereignty and the sovereignty of many other countries in the world. Number four, India becoming a nuclear power in 1974. A crucial step that ensured India's stability was India becoming a nuclear power. Most importantly, with its own indigenous technology developed within the country at extremely frugal costs. After India's independence, scientist Homi Bhabha convinced Prime Minister Nehru the importance of pursuing nuclear technology for peaceful power as well as future weapons development. In 1954, Bhabha Atomic Research Center BARC was formed to start the groundwork for it. In 1956, Asia's first functioning nuclear reactor was created here. It was called Apsara. In 1971,
America sent world's largest nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, towards India into the Bay of Bengal to threaten India during the India-Pakistan War. India did not flinch and won that war against Pakistan. After that, in 1974, BARC along with DRDO made India's first nuclear test explosion, officially making India a nuclear power. The 1974 nuclear test paved way for a new India which could not be threatened or destabilized by such US interventions ever again. The test also enabled India to move away from total reliance on foreign security guarantees like the USSR. India became the first country outside the five countries of UN Security Council to become a nuclear power. This daring move by India created widespread international disapproval and sanctions on India. However, India weathered it out and continued its advancement in nuclear technology. Over the years, India's BARC was unique in producing various technologies which hugely benefited common people, not just in India, but in various developing countries with a South South cooperation. BARC created 70 varieties of disease free crops, developed vaccines, developed affordable cancer treatments, and gene mapping. BARC also played a crucial role in India's space research organization ISRO. ISRO provided many countries with cost effective launch services for their micro and nano satellites, which made space accessible to not just a few elites, but to the lives of ordinary people in developing and developed countries. This showed that India's nuclear and space research was not for oppressing others, but a contributor to rare benefits of many other countries.
This made India's stable existence valuable to a large part of the world.
The satellites helped in predicting weather disasters, managing natural resources, benefiting agriculture and telecommunications for India and many other countries. India also gave the world a new learning in achieving space travel at shockingly low cost with unbelievable precision and success. In 2008, India conducted first moon mission Chandrayaan-1 and became the first country to detect water on the moon. It cost just $89 million dollars when any moon mission costs hundreds of millions of dollars by any country. In 2013, India conducted first Mars mission and became the only country to land on Mars in its first attempt. It cost just $74 million, dollars, and the joke became that India's actual Mars mission cost way less than a Hollywood fictional movie on Mars mission, which was $108 million. Dollars. Because India built its nuclear and space technologies to such a high standard by itself, India could dictate its own self defense and sovereignty without falling prey to any foreign interventions or regime change operations. At the same time, India also projected that these capabilities and India being a stable nation benefits people around the world.
Number five, 1970 Pharma Patent Act. Another great area that contributed to India's nation building was the policies India made on its pharmaceutical industry.
In 1970, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi introduced the Indian Patents Act. It was a revolutionary step. According to it, patent of a medicine would be protected only in its manufacturing process and not the final constitution of the medicine. This meant that companies in India were now free to manufacture any branded drug by making them with their own manufacturing process, and they would not have to pay huge fees for making the medicine because of its patent. They were called as generic versions. This drastically brought down the cost of all medicines by as much as 90%. International pharma companies objected to this act, but were unsuccessful in blocking it. Indian government firmly made it legally binding as a sovereign action for its public health. Thereafter, India built an exceptional competence within India in manufacturing high quality medicines at extremely low cost. This step became a lifesaver for not just people in India, but for most other developing countries' people. After that, India slowly became a lifesaver for developed nations as well, like America, UK, Japan, Canada, and most of Europe. Today, 50% of America's generic medicines are supplied by India. In the early 2000s, when HIV/AIDS disease became almost a death sentence for most of Africa, the cost of treatment per person was nearly 10,000 US dollars per person per year. At that time, India's generic companies, especially Cipla, offered the drug for under $1 per day. This single move saved millions of lives globally. India is also the largest supplier of vaccines, producing 60% of the world's vaccines and supplying them to over 150 countries. India became widely known as the pharmacy of the world. Though many other countries like China, Germany, and America do manufacture generics, India became the country which could supply most reliable medicines at the lowest price and in the highest volumes worldwide. At the time of India's independence in 1947, 99% of India's medicines were held as patents by foreign companies. India at the time faced hundreds of thousands of deaths due to epidemics like plague, cholera, and malaria, with a complete lack of access to medicines by the vast majority of India. India's Revolutionizing Patent Act in 1970 became a life changer for people in India and people across the world.
It became one more reason why the world viewed India's stability and progress as hugely valuable to the rest of the world. Number six, bank nationalization. One of the most revolutionizing moves in India that had far reaching effects in India's nation building.
Infrastructure building, inclusivity of the poor into India's economics and India's finances was the 1969 act of nationalizing all large private banks in India whose deposit exceeded 500 crore rupees. It was done by an ordinance by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. It meant that all those 500 crore and above private banks' ownerships in India would be seized by the government. Obviously, the move came under huge shock and opposition by the private bankers and the banking circles. The matter went to the Supreme Court in a landmark case called R.C. Cooper versus Union of India 1970. R.C. Cooper was a director and shareholder in several major banks, including Central Bank of India and Bank of Baroda. He filed the petition arguing that the government's ordinance and subsequent act violated his fundamental rights and those of the banks. The Supreme Court initially declared the Nationalization Act of 1969 unconstitutional. After that, the Act was revised in 1970 and called the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Act. It assured fair compensation for bank owners, and the Act got accepted.
What was the advantage of nationalizing banks and how did it change India forever? Here is how.
Number one, banks under private ownerships were confined to only urban and elite areas. The nationalization and government role brought banks into deep interiors of India across India's length and breadth. Number two, for the first time, it made poorer people in rural areas have a trusted place where they could deposit savings. This brought in huge deposits from every pocket of India. It also immediately brought people in the interiors of India into the formal banking system and the economics of the country. The huge funds that got deposited helped tremendously in growing India in several sectors in coming years. Number three, Private banks did not lend credit to large number of sectors. The nationalized banks were mandated to lend them. These sectors were agriculture, small scale industries and exports. The credit line given to agricultural sector particularly played a huge role in India's subsequent green revolution, which brought the milestone food security in India. Number four, the vast expansion of banking branches to rural areas created a massive infrastructure throughout the country into India's interiors. Number five, the banking sector suddenly became a major employer across India, which lifted large numbers of people out of poverty. To this day, government banking remains a major attractive employment institution in India that gives incentives to huge number of people to get educated for a ticket out of poverty.
Number seven, food security. Till the 1960s, 2 decades after its independence, India was widely mocked as the begging bowl of the world for its huge food shortage and for being completely dependent on America for its food aid.
This food aid from America came with many times its size of an enormous humiliation. The quality of the food sent by the US was widely mocked as of a standard which American animals refused to eat. The food shipments were used for pressurizing India on its foreign policies and in stopping India from criticizing America's Vietnam War and America's many other aggressive foreign policies. When an Indian official pointed out that the Pope and the UN Secretary General were saying the same things as India was, America's then President Johnson retorted, saying, "The Pope and the UN Secretary General do not need our wheat."
In other words, since India needs America's wheat for its food, so it does not have a right to speak against America.
Books on India like Famine 1975, written by William and Paul Paddock, predicted that by 1975 India would face mass starvation and suggested that the world should not focus on India because it cannot be saved and should instead aid other countries that could be salvaged. From 1964 to 1966, then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri created an initial political will to free India from its food dependence. He called for the nation to give up one meal a day to preserve food for all. In 1968, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi launched the official Green Revolution for India with a few drastic policies.
In 3 years, a miracle happened.
In September 1971, Indira Gandhi announced that her government will not import any grain from the United States in 1972. The main scientist who made this possible was Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is also known as the father of India's Green Revolution. He was instrumental in importing 18,000 tons of high-yielding variety of disease-free dwarf seeds from Mexico. The policy had to be vehemently defended in the parliament. This was done by then Food Minister C. Subramaniam, who is also known as the political father of Green Revolution. This initiative was coupled with lending credit to India's farmers, which was made possible through bank nationalization. This was paired with India's land reform policy and a huge investment in irrigation infrastructure and bringing minimum support price for farmers to get an assured return for their crops from the government. The net result was India never looked back. After 1976, India officially became self sufficient in food and after that slowly became the highest exporter of rice and the second highest exporter of wheat in the world.
The achievement truly worked as a second independence from colonial shackles. Number eight, telecom revolution. In the late 1980s, a whole new India emerged because there was an extraordinary transformation in India that happened very quickly. It was the telecom revolution. The person who is known as the father of this revolution is Dr. Sam Pitroda.
In 1984, Dr. Pitroda renounced his US citizenship and took up Indian citizenship. He then worked for 1 rupee a year salary and made an impossible transformation to India, which benefits each Indian to this day. Sam Pitroda famously said, information and communication is the fourth pillar of democracy. In the 1980s, telephone was a luxury item for urban elites. The rural areas were practically cut off from all telecommunications for ordinary people. In 1984, when Rajiv Gandhi became the Prime Minister of India, Sam Pitroda was appointed for revolutionizing Indian telecoms. Dr. Pitroda wanted that at first, every Indian citizen should have access to a phone at a walking distance. He therefore conceptualized a vast network of telephone booths in every street corner deep into the rural pockets of India. To make it possible, India needed to move from analog telecoms to digital telecoms. At the time, while most of the Western world was taking baby steps to transition to digital telecoms, Sam Pitroda's visionary planning leapfrogged India into a whole new modern digital telecoms across India directly and very quickly. Dr. Pitroda first founded the Center for Development of Telematics CDOT in 1984 to manufacture within India the components and equipments of the exchange. As a result, not only the cost got drastically reduced to just a small fraction, but most importantly, the products were customized specifically for Indian conditions, which were dust proof, humidity proof, and did not require air conditioning. Besides, it created a huge employment in the telecom sector in India, and the strong knowledge base it created in India in the telecom sector played a huge role in future years in India's massive growth in the telecoms industry within India and worldwide.
But the most important part of it was the power it gave to individual citizens in India.
The extension of telecom's connectivity to villages brought rural India's problems into the national conversation. It gave the poor a voice. A farmer could check market prices in the city before selling his crop. A poor migrant worker could talk to families back home and exchange news on problems, injustice, atrocities. Slowly, news of deep pockets of India became much more prominent to the urban elites. All this played a vital role in enhancing India's democracy at that time. What it also did was, back in 1980s, it laid the basic foundation for future 4G mobile telecommunications in India, which started much later in 2012. This made possible direct cash transfers to individual citizens, which started in 2013, and slowly large numbers of Indian citizens in remote pockets could inexpensively own a mobile phone. Number 9, higher education of high quality at nominal cost.
A huge contributor to India's nation building was India's establishment of a wide network of high quality higher education system across the country at absolutely nominal cost.
It benefited India's nation building in a multi-layered, multifaceted way. The result of it was reaped especially after the 1980s as a large number of highly qualified population got created, which fueled an IT revolution that contributed not only to India's economy but also immensely to the technology worldwide. India's first Prime Minister Nehru envisioned setting up a high quality education in science, engineering, medicine, and management. In 1950s and 60s, India's niche engineering, medical, and management institutes, IITs, IIMs, and medical institutes started getting built. But apart from these elite institutes, a great step was the creation of a network of universities across India by then Education Minister Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. He set up a body called University Grants Commission UGC that brought in a highly prestigious standard of education in government universities across the country for a wide range of subjects for bachelor's and master's degrees. This was coupled with a heavy government funding so that their fees would be so nominal that this high quality education would be available to everyone, especially the poor. Several Nobel laureates and CEOs of the topmost global companies were produced by these nominally charged government universities. Apart from the fact that it incentivized a large Indian population to work hard towards education as a ticket out of poverty. This huge skilled population in India also became instrumental in fueling innovations, economic growth, and science education outside India in various developed countries, especially USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. From a country which was nearly 90% illiterate during its independence in 1947, India became an ambassador of highly educated people to the world. It became the second largest producer of science and technology graduates worldwide and a country with one of the highest participation of women in science and technology worldwide.
Number 10, right to work. In 2006, a law was passed in India which made 270 million people in India come out of poverty between 2006 and 2015.
The highest seen in any country after China. That law was the Right to Work law passed in 2006, also named as MG Narega. India was particularly exceptional because it lifted such a huge number of people out of poverty democratically, unlike many other countries, without any drastic measures and without disrupting or troubling any section of people. The law stated that any Indian has the right to claim employment from the government for up to 100 days a year. Employment became a legal right rather than a charity for the poor. Soon, India's poor people, tribals, women, backward classes found a way to earn a livelihood as a right.
The effect of it on India was far reaching at many different levels and way into the future.
Firstly, the labor in these employments were used especially in building water conservation, irrigation, and building rural infrastructure, which hugely impacted agriculture and rural connectivity. Economic activity started building up quickly into the interior villages in India, which were neglected so far. Women made up 50% of this workforce, and it immediately gave women a financial independence, an individual value in their households, and a bargaining power for their employers. The Obama administration said that India's MG Narega is a lesson to learn from by all lower and middle income countries, and the scheme was successful beyond the expectation of anyone. World Bank called it a stellar example of rural development. The UNDP described it as the largest and best known public works employment guarantee program in the world.
However, the biggest benefit of this step in India was felt in later years when unexpected crisis hit the world.
In 2008, global financial crisis storm hit the entire world. It economically crashed both developed countries as well as poor countries. The recession also brought about an Arab Spring in 2010 soon after that created revolutions and destructions in many African, Middle Eastern and also European countries. At this time in India, right to work was extended to all districts starting from 1st April 2008. Around 55 million households of the most impoverished people in India got a job at this time. The result was that in India, consumptions in rural areas did not go down during recession. As the rest of the world's people were being pushed into poverty during this recession, India was a unique country that not only didn't crash, it brought people out of poverty at a mass scale at this time. In 2020, when COVID pandemic broke out, MG Narega became the backbone of India as a savior for its poor. As millions of migrant workers returned from cities to villages because of an overnight lockdown, 110 million households found employment because of MG Narega's structure in remote parts of India. While other sectors stalled, India's rural economy was kept alive and vast parts of India's poor populations were saved.
Number 11, unique ID for all. India was already built into a stable democratic nation when a milestone step called Aadhaar or unique ID for all came into existence. In 2009, India dreamt of creating the world's largest and most sophisticated biometric ID system for every citizen in India. As a democratic country, the purpose of this ID in India was not for surveillance but to reach welfare and benefits to every citizen. Before this ID, reaching out welfare to poor citizens was impossible in most cases because the process involved middlemen where large amounts of money got stolen and benefits never reached the poor. On 28 January 2009, under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, the Unique Identity Project was launched. In July 2009, a person joined this project as a chairman who is considered the father of the Aadhaar card project in India. His name is Nandan Nilekani, who was previously the co-founder of India's IT giant Infosys. His technological vision made such a grand scale project a success with immense robustness at record time. The project was also possible because of the IT connectivity to interiors of India previously achieved through Telecom Revolution by Sam Pitroda. On 29 September 2010, 1 year after its inception, Aadhaar got implemented in its first phase, and since then, 99% of India's citizens got included in it, which is 1.42 billion people in India. Today, this one milestone has made possible reaching out to the last citizen in India, life saving and life changing benefits. From direct cash transfers to poor and old people, to free food transfers at doorsteps, to bank transactions at doorsteps of people in the interiors of India, to direct salary transfers for right to work, to government healthcare, a new India got created after 2009, which was far from any imagination before implementation of unique ID for every citizen. Nobel Prize winner Paul Romer called India's Aadhaar a model that every nation should study and adopt. He called Aadhaar the most sophisticated identification and the greatest poverty killer app in the world. British Prime Minister Tony Blair said that I keep telling people around the world that if you want to see real reforms and an example that government can really work for people, look at India's digital ID system. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer showed immense awe and admiration towards Aadhaar and said that Britain should learn from it. Today, this scheme has the potential to lift most of India out of poverty if proper planning is done by the government in its spending, since India is now one of the top 10 largest economies of the world, having come a long way from its conditions at the time of its independence. Mahatma Gandhi had famously said, the greatness of a country can be judged by the way it treats its most vulnerable members. A country's overall respect in the world is not created by GDP numbers or stock market prices or even futuristic innovations. Its respect is automatically created by how it makes policies that give food, livelihood, rights, and access to justice for every individual in its country, irrespective of religion, ethnicity, or poverty. These are also factors that keep a country stable, democratic, and progressing for a long time. Today, it looks normal to see a large country like India stable, integrated together, and thriving. But it is a miracle that this has happened. Everyone had predicted it would never be possible. Losing that success is also very easy and happens frequently to countries around the world. It is important to recognize from India's 79 years what steps could make such a complicated country with the most improbable chance of democracy a success story of stability, progress, and freedom. Do let me know what you thought of this video in the comment section below. See you in the next video.